Welcome back to the second day of this invigorating summit called Facade and Beyond. Day 2 brings to you two case study presentations. One on India Technology Center, which is the world's largest faceted wall. And the second project, the Oberoi Udai Vilas in Udaipur, 10 years running in the World Hall of Fame for Leisure and Travel, the only Indian project to ever stay in the World Hall of Fame for that long. The, the, the day ends with a panel discussion on sustainable building envelope. For this, we would like to thank our sponsors, title partner Timex Bond ACPHPL, and our supporting partners VS1 and Pidilite. The panel brings on its expertise from our supporting association IGBC.
A very good evening to all our valued speakers and audience on the second day of this knowledgeable and informative summit on facade and fenestration. It gives me immense pleasure to walk our audience through what we have in store for us today. We will begin with a case study for today on India Technology Center by Venkatraman Associates. Our presenters for this case study are architect Ravindra Kumar from VA Group and Mr. Franz Safford from VS1. A second case study is on the Oberoi Udai Vilas project by architect Parul Zaveri from Abhikram, accompanied by architect Ajay Nayak. Our last and final segment for day 2 of the summit is a panel discussion where we will throw light upon sustainable building envelopes. Our moderator for this interactive session is architect Pushyamitra Londhe. Our panelists are Mr. Bejay Jayan from Pidilite, Mr. Micha Pawelka from Priedemann, Mr. Manjunath Shetty from Envelopetechnik Facade Consultancy, and Mr. Syed Beary from Beary Group. I hope you all have an enlightening session. Thank you.
Day 2 of the Facade Summit brings to you another invigorating case study presentation. This is India's largest faceted wall. You guessed that, it's the India Technology Center, Pune. The architect on the panel, architect Ravindra Kumar, is going to be in conversation with Mr. Franz Safford of Innovation Glass, New York. Architect Ravindra Kumar is also the design director of Pra Group, and he has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of architecture. He is a visiting faculty member at various departments of architecture, with years previously at UCLA, Cornell, Keene State, Marlborough, Berlin School of Architecture, IACCA Barcelona, Toronto University, Bangalore University, RVCE Bangalore, Anna University Chennai, among many more. He is the winner of various national and international awards. His publications are recognized widely in the field of architecture. Our other speaker for this session is Mr. Franz Safford of Innovation Glass. Franz, CEO of Innovation Glass, brings a unique level of expertise to the table in the implementation of innovative building solutions. Franz has a deep understanding of metal, glass, structural engineering, design, production, installation, management, and product development, which he has garnered over 40 years in the glass curtain wall industry. Over to you to bring on the best.
So it's really great to really look back and how the project began, don't you think? How we met, and then how you slowly became comfortable with us and our approach, our system. And the key project, I think, if you recall, was the Spertus project in Chicago.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to sort of walk back that memory lane. I mean, I still remember when I was, sitting with John and drawing some diagrams, and he was quite, quite innovative in his sort of thought process, and he wanted to build a spectacular building which has a spectacular facade, and also the experience of the building must be very, very haptic, as what most spaces and villages and cities in India are. It's very experiential. It's not sort of sort of repetitive. And it is in that context, when we did a few diagrams and then we emerged out to what we wanted to build, I did position a very complex idea of the secondary walling system. And in strange ways, they were fascinated with it, but never did I think I would meet you, Franz, or your technology. That was, I did read about innovation systems, years before, and the kind of system design that you had done, we had tried to do many years before with another Indian local fabrication company, where we didn't want to have horizontal elements. So we wanted to try and achieve the maximum flexibility of the glass division and the glazing lines, using minimal aluminum, only using vertical mullions, and trying to figure out a method to clip the glass so that visually there is umpteen possibilities of visual connect to the outside as an experience. More from the inside perspective to look outside. That we did manage to achieve for a small bit in some, rickety way with a local fabricator. But when I looked at that possibility for project, India Technology Center, Cummins, I was fascinated by your introduction. And almost, I think this was one of the first corporate projects where we never tendered.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a good discussion, but when I saw your vision, and that's always what makes me, excited to get up in the morning, is when I meet people like you, and you have this literally impossible vision, right? And you challenge the market. You challenged us to see, can the market respond to this vision? And we were just, it was a fortuitous meeting, because we had cracked our heads open to solve this multifaceted problem on this previous project at Spertus. And it was one of those moments where you had a lot of pressure to come up with a solution, and pressure is the mother of invention. And then you have to have a good progressive attitude. And so, when we innovate, it's because we have someone like you on the other side who also wants to innovate. And so we became partners. and all the problems that we encounter, when you innovate, by definition, you are going into uncharted waters. You're doing something for the first time. And when you do that, inevitably you learn something new. And if you have the right attitude about it, and you say, listen, this is part of the innovative process, that is how you achieve the end result, which we did together. And I have to say, it is a spectacular project. When I show this project in the United States or in Europe, it is unprecedented. People are very, very impressed when they see it, and they see the original vision that you had and the final product, right? The end result is exactly like you envisioned. We didn't really have to compromise.
Completely. I cannot disagree at all. And what you mentioned is absolutely accurate. I tell my team that we as architects, we get paid somewhere between 3.5% to 7%, of the project fees, because our posture of interference is only that much. The rest of it is engineering and erection and execution. I tell people that we might think and be the tank to sort of procreate an idea, but every time I open, the door of my Lexus car, and I'm fascinated by the amount of technology that goes just in that door.
Yeah.
In the edge line of that door, that in such dynamic speed, you're able to comprehend no water ingress. There is no weep hole. There is no, secondary layer to it. And it's perfect engineering. It's such a sealed idea. And in a whiff of a second, you can open the door. When you park, you've just finished, 180 kilometers per hour on the highway, and there's no water inside. That is technology. And what the architects boast of doing big buildings and great architecture and building facade, fenestrations, is all zilch when you look at just that door of the car.
Yes, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I have also been inspired by that same door, Ravindra. I have. I appreciated those kinds of amazing achievements, which everyone has every day, but you don't step back and say, wow, I just, and the mechanism to open the door, right? That the complexity of that, and it just continues. So yeah, and that is really the spirit of the VS1 system. The VS1 system is the result of my many years of being a student, to be a student of the process, and what happened was I began, just like you did with the door, and I have done with the door of the car. I said to myself, what does a curtain wall want to be? I asked this question in 2004, and at that time, the unitized concept, all the other curtain wall systems, they had already been in the market for decades. But I noticed that there were all kinds of discussions going on. You, the architects, were trying to really demand more out of a curtain wall. You wanted it to do more things: performance, shaping, attaching things, integrating technology into it. And I noticed that the existing technology was really founded on a very basic older concept that was first introduced in the 1950s. So that's when I asked that question, and I essentially began to re-engineer the curtain wall, and our result was the VS1 system. So when we began to question every component of the curtain wall solution matrix. Now, how do you solve a curtain wall? And that's why, for instance, the horizontal mullion was eliminated. It was engineered away because we acknowledged that modern glass is so strong. It wasn't as strong in the 1950s, so they had to put a two-way grid. So those are the kinds of questions that we asked, and the result is our system. So it is a minimization of metal, and it allowed us to meet someone like you, Ravindra, and apply the same kit of parts, the basic kit of parts, to create your facade solution. And I keep meeting people like you, and you have fantastic, challenging problem statements. And then I see, can the system answer your question, so to speak? And it definitely, we had fantastic alignment on the CTC project.
Absolutely. You know, many years back, Franz, 95, I think 94, we were, you know, we won a competition project in Bangalore. It was a property which was developed by a private entrepreneur. And for some reason, the designs that was presented never sort of caught the accurate conclusion. So I remember I did it was all hand drawing, you know, computers were there, but they were not so much into practice. And it was, I had to draw, even now, I'm a bit handicapped on the computer, but I can draw, you know, and then we made all these beautiful drawings colored by hand and used tracing paper to create presentation. There was no PowerPoint, there was no PDF. And, you know, and we made a big model and presented to the client. And then when I told him that I'm going to wrap the whole building with glass, which is just stuck on aluminum, he started laughing. You know, he thought I was a mad guy, you know. This was 94, 95. Though the technology was not so very common in India or Bangalore, and it was not heard of. And when we told the developer that I'm going to just use silicon sealants, or, you know, and then stick it up to the aluminum and everything will look like a sheet of glass with no projection whatsoever, you know, the whole boardroom of 16 guys started laughing in union. And then, you know, it took an effort of almost 3 months for me to convince them that we should be able to do that. And the same gentleman sponsored my education program with Lucio, you know, the guy who designed the Sydney Opera House, the external skin from Permisa, you know. So he was my teacher for doing my master's on technology for many months. And he hosted me at Novotel on the Darling Harbour. So it was amazing experience to learn from him how he did. And fascinating to see is the Sydney Opera House external skin. The glazing system was done with timber and glass, and they were mostly vertical mullions, you know, and it was just pinned on the external and not on the inside. And it was the main structural hub of the element was larger by the section dimension and size on the exterior skin rather than the interior. So it was quite sort of a throwback, you know, for me when we met your team and you know, looked at all your diagrams and the potential that we could do for Cummins. And that was like, you know, walking back a heartthrob. So thank you, Franz.
That's great.
I have to confess. And I want to share with you a small presentation that, you know, we assembled, which sort of walks back into that sort of position of history, and also how we went about doing what we did. I'm sure you will love to see this, and you know, it would be a sort of a walk back on the memoir.
Great.
I'm going to share the screen now. Let me see how to do this. Yes. Okay. This was one of the first sketches that actually initiated the idea of the plan diagonal and the facade diagonal. In some sensibility for us, we never thought we would eventually do the largest secondary walling system facade on the planet, for bringing that pinch of recognition with you for erecting Guinness Book of World Record. Added to that, when we started working on the plans, we wanted to recognize an India climate. In a way, when we looked at the master plan, though this was a technology center for Cummins, it was a large garden hub. It was in the heart of the city, Pune, and there was so much of landscape potential available around as it surrounds that we wanted to create a tech space which is sitting in a garden, you know, which has lots of greenery, and use the thermal equilibrium to reduce the quantum of air conditioning load that needs to be used up for the workspace area. Of course, the laboratories as test cells are intense guzzlers on energy because they are huge engines which are running on a million cycle, you know, at adverse conditions, which are developed in a small test lab before they are, you know, they complete a million cycle and then they are mounted onto locomotives or aircrafts. And it's fascinating to see that this facility is in Pune in India before these huge engines are erected in aircrafts. So we started working on the geometries of the plan. I must also thank John here because he was a beautiful vision as a client head, the Chief Executive Officer of Operations for Cummins at that time. And we both actually sat together and doodled a few diagrams to understand what can be done. And we did it like a creative workshop and looking at all these spines of green between the boxes of offices and laboratories and you know, corner vertical towers, and everything was hand-drawn. And there was an existing building that was also programmed to be retained, you know, as what it was. And it was a very different kind of a schedule where the laboratories were functioning. We were building on top of it, we were building below it and around it. So this was the facing model that we evolved to make that kind of an element. And some of the features of the terrace was also interesting to see that there was a lot of engineering mechanical equipments kept on the terrace, but we also created a huge recreation and a food space gallery on the terrace, which was also programming the same idea of light and the joy of air, natural air into the building. When we you know, looked at many iterated facades, the big sketch was such a simple line diagram, but it spoke a lot in terms of acceptance from the client and also for me as personally as an architect, because though they represented sort of as a metaphor, you know, to connect to chemistry and physics, you know, using modular nature of geometry, which sort of assembles as complex molecules coming together to create a sense of reaction. Sometimes I was wondering, why must I communicate that as a language to the facade of the building? But what we did was to build up a huge volume of secondary walling system to create maximum daylight and ensure that the glass on the primary facade of the building was minimized to only a ribbon of 1.8 meters. And we created a thermal equilibrium on the perimeter of that wall to keep that temperature 5 to 7 degrees less during peak summer compared to what temperature was existing on the outside. This is where I think collaboration with Franz became a super success story. And you can look at the roof of the whole technology space with the amphitheater, and along the edge line, the glass facade, which started pumping, you know, three-dimensional projections to create a green sort of a thermal equilibrium between the primary facade and the secondary facade. You know, my team, my super sort of team from Pune office managed to generate the quality of drawings under the leadership of Nayak and his whole team managed to do Pradnya and Peshwa. They did a fantastic sort of turnaround to create the idea of that sketch into the plan geometry and its resolutions to the making of these very, very complex test cell laboratories for the campus Cummins. These are some of the sort of inside images of what was happening as we were building the facility to understand these large laboratories and the kind of elements that we incorporated to retain the existing building and the laboratory, and we spanned these precast, pre-tensioned structural elements as the roof elements, and we could manage to build on top of that. So literally there was a building as an intense laboratory functioning on the bottom edge of the space, and we were building on top and building around it to create what we did. And the most fascinating aspect of the Connect was the resolution of the secondary walling element. I mean, this was a super cruiser for us, since we wanted to accomplish a facade idea which would be able to breathe, which was able to allow metal panels, terracotta panels, glass panels in it, aluminum panels in it, you know, to seamlessly integrate in a method that would articulate the kind of temperature between the external grid and the internal grid. I mean, these are some of the erection sort of programs. And trust me, Franz, I was quite intimidated by the nature of reciprocation that the contractors and the client teams and the client representatives and the project managers were experiencing. They thought that this was a completely mad architect doing some complex sort of crumbled resolutions on the facade, but so much of engineering had gone into analyzing, you know, each element of the wall with its incidence of light at peak summer as to how much of fenestration we must allow, how much of light incidence we must encourage to ensure that we maximize daylight, but at the same time remove radiation. So every elevation panel not only had a geometry which was aspirational as an architect, but also was thermally sort of analyzed in its behavior pattern with our sort of dynamic modeling for temperature analysis. And this was some of the erection programs, and the complex geometry was only possible because of VS1. You know, salute to that method of technology that we could accomplish three-dimensional geometry to mount both aluminium, terracotta, and glass in a very seamless way, and made it look so simple and spectacular. I mean, it just completely annoyed the method of exploratory necessity for us post our, you know, resolution of all the shop drawings. And this was the inside images that we had generated to understand how the visual connects would be. And this is the complex diagram which we put into thermal modeling to analyze and evaluate as to why we in fact included all the tree crop around the facility, so that the lower parts of the building could have a lot of glass, and certain segments of the building could also have a lot of glass, for the only reason that there was also huge amount of foliage that was standing right along the edge lines of the building that would create the necessary shade. And this method of analytical thinking of a master plan became the exercise primarily to analyze and see how each of these elements would even go on to the roof, go on to the wall panel, go on to the walkways and corridors, also onto the perimeter edge lines of the building. And then this is how the building started, you know, appearing after it was all finished. It was bulbous, it was three-dimensional in geometry, it had surfaces which had super clean sheen, it had surfaces which were completely matte gray terracotta. It was also transluting the concrete beyond, you know, the concrete exposed panels of the primary wall from the bottom edge of the clear glass elements. And this is the kind of wooded site that we had. Spectacular green and spectacular shading potentials on the master plan. And this would sort of emerge as a technology crystal, almost like a UFO, you know, in the park, which was doing some testing, which was invincible to the nature of man ability in terms of his innovation to the technology realm of mobility. Also, new edges of garden was created, and this kind of conversation that happened.
We had a break in your connection.
Yeah, are you able to hear me? Sorry. Yeah. So the nature of connect that was happening between the building and the landscape, the conversations that was happening here was very fascinating as a position of experience for us in making the architecture. Some of the close-up visuals that present the idea of the secondary wall being away from the primary, you can see the translucence connect to the sky and to the greenscapes that was sort of programmed to grow between the two layers, and how the reception center became seamless to create the airlock. And also what was beautiful was the entrance porch was also integrated with the same element of technology to anchor back into the facade element seamlessly into three-dimensional geometry. This is how the lobby reads in the night. This is the corner wedge of the building which kind of projects out, and I must thank, of course, the Cummins team to agree to complete this three-dimensional facade to all four walls of the building. You know, there was huge discussions that was happening where people discouraged the fact that we did not have to spend the kind of money. But, you know, as an architect, I could manage to get an audience from the client principals to impress them that it was important to create a thermal envelope. And what we were doing was not theatrics or acrobatics on a facade idea or a geometry of the facade, but primarily to create the kind of equilibrium that Pune needed. And this is a very important image where you can see through the translucency, the primary and the secondary wall, and how it is open to sky and allows light to diffuse, but not radiation, and deflects the kind of heat ingress of the radiant heat into the building lines. And this little detail is so complete. You can see the stretched metal panels, which allow necessary breathing for engineering wall panels, and how the glass panel integrates with terracotta. This is like a super beautiful sort of composition of metal, silica, and clay, and how each of these elements grew into a resolution to make the facades breathe and be presented in the way they can look like. And added to that, we started looking at promenades. The glass wall started becoming like elements of geometry, elements of sequential, sort of repetitive geometry of mullions, and elements which became like a colonnade in the interior corridors, which was again fascinating to reflect back the idea of the Esther temples that we find in some of the major cities of India. In parallel, the little elements of dots and the whole glass panel in its three-dimensional resolution of geometry, reflecting mostly the green and the grass beyond, and the sky, added to the lucid sensibilities of the external skin. Seamlessly, how we could manage to wedge in the porch. There were smaller porch, larger porch elements, and the whole lobby space, which were multiple lobby areas depending on the nature of function. And you can see here, the old wall of the existing building, which we retained within the building, is still there, which is all made of basalt. And we didn't demolish the building, and the laboratories that were functioning in this particular space continued to work during the whole construction period. We managed to host 60,000 square feet of laboratory right in the womb of the building and built around it and below and on the wedges of it, which was a fantastic experience for us to see an opportunity to build like that. And the interiors was also very austere, very subtle. And these are again the VS1 skylights on top, which brings in maximized daylight at every 18 meter to 24 meter grid lines, which gives ample light, and there are absolutely no lights required to be switched on. This is like a good daylight. And you can see that none of the lights in the corridors or the workspaces are on, but people are working at the same moment of time. And the entrance reception center and the lobby spaces, eventually the reward was, even before the building was done, the principal of Cummins made a plaque in balsa and tropical timber, like a huge panel, and gifted 500 people the facade of the building, and its complex polyhedrous nature with VS1 as a gift memoir during the groundbreaking ceremony. And we stuck to our imagination, and the guns were rolling, and we did manage to accomplish what we all thought we might fail. Thank you for that, Franz.
And thank you for the vision and the collaboration, Ravindra.
Thank you, Franz. Here I stop sharing the screen, and I'll let you present the technology punch of today's discussion.
Great. So I will just quickly play my few slides. Some of them, of course, you have shown already. So here, as we've discussed already, you had this vision on the left. Those are your renderings, and then you see what happened on the right. It's one of those moments where we found the right collaboration, the right team, so that your vision actually came to fruition. And this is, for me, very satisfying that my team could respond to your leadership, visual leadership with our details. And it's absolutely satisfying because projects like this are very difficult. And when you have the right team together, you work through all of those issues and resolve them to keep the project moving forward. So when you defined your vision, finally, we then, of course, began to really model the micro elements, and it began with a big global model that was created in 3 dimensions using AutoCAD 3D. And then we removed or used that 3-dimensional information to create our fabrication drawings. And this was critical because of the custom nature of this geometry, where every single mullion had a unique and different drawing. So the only way that you can really ascertain accuracy, create the accurate models to structurally analyze them, is to do them in 3 dimensions, and then take that model information for analysis, drawing, fabrication, and also installation planning. And you can see here are some corner 3-dimensional modeling. We had to create stability here. And then on the right, you can see the section through a typical mullion, and there isn't a single straight line. So your design was bold. It essentially violated any sort of standard rules of curtain wall. And VS1, my team stepped up and we created these absolutely fantastically shaped mullions. So it was absolutely great that the system could respond that way. We used the India code, India standard, to derive all of our loading information. And then we applied all those loads to the structure to use it to size the mullions, the connections, the glass, the terracotta, and the screening panels. And this is the core of why we really enjoyed meeting each other, because our system allowed all of these angular variations of your facade to be easily essentially accommodated. But you see the mullion in the middle is always vertical. So it reduced the complexity of all of that geometry and the various angles to a simple fitting at the outside edge of the mullion. And you can see the extreme rotational variations from the picture on the left, the center, and on the right. And then when you actually see it going up after you draw it, we were very happy. We had almost no fabrication mistakes because of the accuracy of the model that was created. And you can see here, this mullion is 23 meters in length, and it is comprised of 5 different planes and connections. And it was constructed on the ground and lifted in a single lift to allow this kind of complexity to actually be put up in the field. So all of those issues had to be solved, and were solved by our collaboration and by our team on the ground. So all of the components that you're looking at here are all the standard VS1 kit of parts. So it's essentially a giant Lego system for architects that you can literally use to create some very, very unique solutions. And you don't have to suddenly go to a different company because you have changed the material. For instance, let's say from glass to terracotta, or here you see perforated metal panels. System was able to capture all of those requirements that you had for the project. And as you said, we were really proud that we were able to integrate the terracotta tiles seamlessly into the facade, so everything is on the same plane, the same surface. And then late in the project, there was this requirement to create a weather atrium at the main entrance area with the airlock. And so we had to create a glass that gave the impression of terracotta on one elevation so that we could seal it with silicone at the entrance area. And that's what you see on the right. We call it terracotta glass, which was a unique, innovative achievement that was first used on your project. And then, as you said, the skylights, again, you can see very minimal amount of metal that allows maximum transparency. And it enables you to make the skylight very flat, which is what you needed here. And again, minimization of structure, maximum light coming in, that's the goal. Here's the airlock, which is using glass as a structural element with minimum metal support. You can see here, it's a very, very austere, clean, super modern aesthetic. It is exciting to walk through these doors. Every time I walk through these doors, this entrance, I get excited. I mean, it's visually, you may not be attuned to architecture, but as a human being, when you walk up to this facade, to the main entrance, and you walk under the canopy, and then you walk through this glass crystal cube vestibule, it's exciting. And then you get into this very beautiful lobby, and you're ready to engage with the staff. So one of the great achievements of my career that we were able to capture your vision and help you realize it. It's the most satisfying result that I could have as a professional. So thank you. And then I will stop to share.
Fantastic, Franz. Thank you. I think, for a facade or for a building of such engineering prowess, to complement VS1 was a perfect sort of union of both the idea of composition and a technology resolution. I was getting the chills when you showed me those images of those cranked up bow elements which were shooting up to 24 meters. And I kept asking the project managers and your engineers whether that would touch base for a 2.5 kPa wind load. I had the shivers, and it's amazing that the diagrams proved everything accurate. And in its minimal nature of its connect, I think the word you used for the lobby space, what you call as austere, the quantum of aluminum that was used per square meter was minimized, in a most fascinating way, which means to say the alloy consumption per square meter was much lesser than any conventional curtain walling system. I mean, this gave me a lot of pride to resolve the technology connect with you. You should comment on this, Franz, as to how the quantum of usage of material is lessened on your particular system.
Yes, it's what fundamentally you have 50% of the metal visually that you have in a conventional curtain wall is removed, and the glass as well. The glass is held 25 or 50 millimeters away from the actual metal. It only connects at points, which builds in a thermal break into the system without any added effort. It's just naturally there. So that was another fundamental design strategy that we wanted on day one, is we wanted a high thermally performing facade solution available for you, you see. So, and because we're able to scale the mullion from being maybe 15 or 100 millimeters all the way to 12 or 13 inches, which is what we used for your project. We are able to accommodate a span variation. So if you have a 10-meter span, suddenly you have a 30-meter span or 20-meter span. The system allows you, without affecting the exterior facade detailing, you can simply scale the mullion, make it deeper, and suddenly you're able to go 20 meters instead of 10 meters. Seamlessly, without changing the system, without affecting the exterior components of what holds the glass. And in the end, also, it allows you to achieve a very favorable cost level for having the innovation, because many visions like yours, Ravindra, you have the fantastic vision, but then the costs come in and the owner doesn't want to pay for them. So that, to me, is the biggest hindrance of innovation, is the cost of the innovation. So it's one of the key character traits of the VS1, is that it achieves that innovation at a very, very good value. And that's why we've been able to do projects. And that's our goal. We want to do excellent architecture, and you helped us really be part of one of the most excellent architectural projects in the world.
Lucho used to always tell me that the facade of the building must be, in its elements, as fundamental and as transparent as it can be, so that when there is a posture of defect or a posture of correction that needs to be done on it, it's easy to access. It's easy to, deal with that skin, comfortably, so that you know where the problem is. So he said it must be like opening a bonnet, and then you see the whole engine geometry in front of you. And there is a certain beauty in it. And for me, when I visualized the whole facade and skin, never did I ever think, I must be honest on that note, that the facade engineering would become so transparent, visible in that, lucid space of the secondary area. And when we walk into the structure and just glimpse the primary wall and the secondary wall, it's fascinating to see exactly what you mentioned, the space between the glass and the principal mullions, which are, almost dancing all the way up, in a complex geometry. And you can see the shimmer of light sort of pierce through the pin and the surface line of the mullion and the surface edge line of the glass. And there is only one connect between two materials of glass, which is the sealant line and the clip, or it is an open-ended element, which also makes the potential for multiple layers of material not being disconnected for qualifying the thermal, expansion coefficients of variations that appear in every material component. So for me, I think that was super nice. And to be able to experience that expression of, the connect, and every junction being visible to the naked eye, and that forming the aesthetic of that, secondary space, was fascinating. And that was only possible because of VS1. And today, as much as we would love to collaborate with, the technology that you founded and funded and progressed in many buildings, as you have done around the world, we are trying our primary best to see how we must incorporate the lessons learned from that technology innovation. Thank you there for such an opportunity also, Franz.
Thank you. I look forward to our next adventure, Ravindra.
Pleasure, Franz. Thank you.
Thank you
for having been a part of this project and making this direction look fantastic. Super nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
VS1 is a revolutionary advancement in curtain wall technology. This system is an exciting new kit of parts that provides the means to a higher level of facade design. VS1 uses a blade-shaped mullion and cast aluminum fittings to support insulating or monolithic glass. VS1 empowers designers to eliminate horizontals, to develop solar energy systems and intelligent building skins, and to achieve long spans and complex geometry, all at great value. VS1 has enabled designers to achieve excellence in architecture all over the world, from huge faceted facades on the new Cummins Technology Center in Pune, India, to an envelope of cold bent glass on a twisting tower in Dhaka, Bangladesh, to clear span gallery walls on the new Statue of Liberty Museum in New York. We can't wait to help bring your design to life. Thank you.
Project to be a part of the World Hall of Fame, Travel and Leisure, that has been in its running for 10 years. We present to you the Oberoi Udai Vilas, Udaipur. Our presenters for this session is architect Parul Zaveri from Abhikram Architects, Ahmedabad, and architect Ajay Nayak from Eden Educated Environments. Architect Parul Zaveri with late Mr. Nimish Patel has established Abhikram, meaning initiation in Sanskrit, an architecture, interiors, conservation and planning consultancy firm in 1979. Since the past 4 decades, the sustainability-focused practice has attempted to re-establish the relevance of decision-making processes using traditional materials, technologies, and crafts in contemporary contexts. The design practice has always focused on the built environment that are functionally, psychologically, environmentally, and spiritually more contextual and more comfortable to its occupants. Ajay Nayak, CEO of Eden Educated Environments, is an architect working with communities on sensitization to local ecologies, mobilization, and resilience. He had been the editor for a popular architectural journal and is a writer, communication and outreach expert on environmental issues. We now present to you the very best.
A very good evening and a big thank you to iDAC for getting us together this evening and to discuss the one of the changing and one of the most dynamic aspects of architecture, which is facade design. It's also an absolute pleasure today to be here this evening to have a discussion with Parul Zaveri, because it has been an inspiration to know her and Nimish Patel of Abhikram, because there are practices who become popular as architecture practices, but there are very few practices which become institutions. And Abhikram, over the last 40 years of its practice, has become such an institution, not just for conservation and thought behind traditional arts and crafts and architecture, but also for contemporary applications of those or carrying them forward. And on a personal note, knowing them for the last 20 years out of those 40 has been a time of inspiration, a lot of knowledge, and also a lot of correctives that you also form in your own practice or your lives. And so a big, it's my absolute privilege and honor to be in this discussion with Parul and to take this forward. I would open this entire conversation, which is on facade design, with the anchor of facade design or attitudes, from attitudes to approaches to consequences, because that's exactly what, when I said it's not a practice, it's Abhikram is also an institution, it's an entire dialogue that has happened in the creation of the work that Abhikram does. From the relationships, the facades, the buildings, it's an entire journey. And I think that is the journey that we will go through today. And starting with, I would like to open this conversation that we are having with the thought that Abhikram has not just been about conservation, but also recreating new buildings from the entire principle of traditional knowledge. So, Parul, if you could just tell us how does Abhikram work on its projects from the approach of facades? How do you design and engineer the facades of your buildings?
Yeah, first, let me thank you and iDAC for giving me this opportunity to talk about our approaches and attitudes to facade design. because it's very different from what's happening around the world today. And we have learned as we progressed, ever since we were in this college, we realized that there's something wrong about it. Of course, initially you started looking at modern architecture because that's what you were taught to do. And having studied in one of the most premier institute of India and abroad, it was some modern architecture was ingrained into us until we traveled all over the world and realized what US and the industrial revolution had done to our buildings, US versus Europe, to Africa, to India. And then we realized that that's why it was a very conscious decision not to design facades. They always emerged out of the relationship between inside and outside. We always worked more on the plans and the sections, and whatever emerged out of that need was what we got as a facade. And if you look at India historically, I would like to share the screen at this point in time. Historically, there was no conscious effort to just design the facades. It was again a resultant of what was inside, what was projected, and what was the local language and the materials that they used. And it always used crafts, as well as, since you had to cool your buildings, make them comfortable, they always responded to the local climate, local materials, local crafts, and what was the purpose of the building that was reflected. And yet, from temple to palaces to any other religious structures, to the houses, right up to even warehouses or even a hatikhana, the language, the elements that were selected, the proportions, were always taken into consideration by whoever designed whatever building they designed. And of course, they all had to be very comfortable to use. So we always felt that whatever you do, you try and use the local traditional materials, traditional technologies, and traditional craftsmen. So we always consciously avoided the style statement of the architect trend that was ushered in with modern architecture. And we got back to what is using our basic motto, that let's get back to India, let's learn from whatever the traditions have to offer us and build accordingly. Today, architects design sitting in the four walls of their office and create a style statement, whereas earlier it was always the craftsmen who were also part of the design team along with the clients. And the designer, even today, of many known historical buildings is anonymous. It is ever since we have started giving importance to architecture, architects, that the styles have come into picture. And to us, having a style means you're limiting your creativity. Say, for example, this is a traditional mud house that we designed for industrialist in Ahmedabad. We got the craftspeople who worked at it. They were the contractors, they were the managers, and they were part of our design team. And the bungas, these buildings stood test of time, and there has not been any problem during 20 inch of rainfall that we had in 12 hours or during the earthquake, devastating earthquake, also it has survived. Amnivas was our another experiment where we worked with the client, the craftsman, and designed a building picking up from the idioms of Jaipur architecture. When we first completed the building, this is what it was. But because a language was established, the client and the craft person could continue to extend the building. And yet it was congruent, which cannot happen today, as we always design buildings that have its limits of growth. Whereas all traditional buildings were designed in a way that they could expand, their facades could change, because there was a language that was established, because there were certain elements that were established. And to take care of that, the craftsperson, who were the carriers of our traditional knowledge and traditional systems and technology, as well as the proportions, they knew what the proportions were. They could continue to build without an architect once the basic design, basic outline was done.
So, Parul, do you think there's a shift in the profession from or the way the profession thinks, and or there needs to be a shift, because there seems to be the demand for speed, the engineering, the project management. The architect today would justify that as a reason for a kind of a systemic approach to designing facades, or specializing in facade design. How would you justify that change or that shift that has happened in contemporary architecture?
To mine and Nimish's understanding, what we realized that the beginning of this shift started with the Industrial Revolution. Till Art Deco time, we did not have this problem. But ushering the Industrial Revolution brought about a major change, in the sense there was electricity. First it was steam, and then there was electricity. And to continue for the industries to grow and to make money and to sustain, our lifestyles became unsustainable. A very conscious attempt was made on planned obsolescence, because the light bulbs that they had designed, which still exist after 100 years, they realized that once we make the light bulb which is so good, no one will come to us. So we have to make light bulbs that are not usable, or they fuse out in few months' time or a year's time. And that is what was called a Phoebus cartel. So today, we don't call it planned obsolescence anymore, we call it an upgrade. But this is what that modern architecture with its modern material, and especially cement, has done. You have seen what I'd shown, the earlier buildings that have survived for centuries, and it's difficult to even break those buildings. But the cement buildings, its life, we all know, is only for 30, 35 years. And in the making of it, again, the cement or the modern materials, they use up a lot of, they create a lot of environmental damage. They use up a lot of energy. They are high embodied materials. They also create a lot of pollution while they are being made, while the material is being extracted, and when they have to be pulled down in this condition, they are not biodegradable, and they continue to affect our environment and make our environment unsustainable. As a result, we had decided that we are not going to follow this system. We have to dig and look to our traditions. We have to look to our history and see what was there. And how can we make, one of the major requirements of the modern buildings was air conditioning. And because we had AC, everyone fell onto that. Instead of going back to our traditions and designing buildings which were comfortable. So this was our major attempt of Torrent Research Center, where we used the traditional knowledge, applied it with modern principles and physics, and designed this building. The best thing about this was we never designed a facade for this. We worked on the plans and the sections to create the airflow, which was not mechanized. All that we used was just a sprayer for spraying air there, and the rest was physics, which did the job. And when we had to make the model, we realized that we have not drawn a single elevation. We had to do the model to do the sun studies, etc. And that's when we designed the elevation. And here you look at the Celebration Mall, which we have designed. And when the client came to us, we told him that we will not do glass facades. You are building in Udaipur, and you have to show that it has to reflect Udaipur. He said, that's exactly what I have come to you for. But how will it be that if we don't do any glass, how will it look? So this is what we showed him, and it works. So we strongly believe that if we change, we have a paradigm shift in the way we look at what are our roots, what do we need to do, and how do we start becoming sustainable. I think our way of looking at architecture will change.
Right. So Parul, going from especially what we just saw at Torrent and what you were contextually presenting at Celebration Mall, the entire derivative has been how systemically you plan a building and how it extends the entire building. The process-driven approach evolves the entire larger layout of the building and results in the facade. Now, how would you apply it on a larger scale? How do you see it contextually growing on a larger establishment where a contemporary architecture would argue the question of scale, setting, and efficiency? How would you contextually establish that?
I would give you examples of two of our complexes. One is Samsara Luxury Resort and Camp near Jodhpur, where we have again used local materials, local arts, local crafts, and the language is local. And all this has been monitored. There has not been a single engineer to manage the site. There has been no project management involved here. All the engineers or the, say, project managers were our traditional craftspeople. And because it was them, we did not even have to visit the site. We just visited site maybe once in 3 months because they only needed someone to interpret the drawings. And our client was there. He drove down from Jodhpur to this site every day, and he helped them to read the drawings. So this is what is created when you use the local language, you use the local craftspeople. There is speed also because they know what is to be done, when is the lime is to be soaked, what kind of stone. Once you establish a language, they go ahead and do everything. They order the materials. It's not like you need project managers. And unfortunately, most of the architects that we meet, they all concur that project managers really become paper pushers. I'm sorry to say this, but that's what happens. And here is an example also in Udaipur where, negotiating the contours of the site was very difficult, a tough task. And we really were not worried because it was all handled by traditional craftspeople without any supervisor. They managed everything. We also used concrete in this. We had lime walls, but there were concrete columns, concrete beams in some cases, and concrete slabs also in some parts. But once you have these people who are trained, they are trained ever since they were born. And we are not looking at them, and we are just going back to trained engineers and whatever the West has imposed on us. We think that's the only way to go. We have to explore our backyards. and see what talent lies in there, what is required by our country. And especially after this pandemic, it's time we relearn, we de-learn and relearn again.
On learnings, I'm going to push you to now the grand Udai Vilas at Udaipur. It has been one of the most published, celebrated projects across the globe and winner of many awards. And even after 20 years, it's contextually remembered or referred to. I would shift when I said scale and context, I would shift to a city now. And if you could share how a process or generating or evolving a facade works at a city level and establishing a project with the city, because generally the argument for a contemporary architect on the facade is the context of the city. Could you just share the learnings and the process-driven approach to creating space and a resultant facade that you're talking about?
Well, there were lots of rules that we had laid out for ourselves because we had done the planning policies of conservation for Udaipur city. So we were sure that we will not do too much cut and fill, minimum cut and fill. The building should be such that it is hugging to the land. You cannot have more than single storage structure right there unless there is a valley situation. No blasting was allowed for cutting of rock because we had lots of animals on this land. And this land has been there pristine because it was the hunting grounds of the royal family. And nothing has changed on it except the two buildings, the historic buildings that are existing on this site, which were also to remain as they are. And we had said that we have to use local materials, local craftspeople, the traditional wisdom has to be applied. Even the artisans have to be local. Even the soft furnishings should come from Rajasthan because hospitality industry always claims that they generate work for local people, whereas actually that's not true because they import a lot of stuff from outside that city or that state or that region. But so these were our conditions, and Mr. Oberoi had told us that you have to design this hotel in a way that in a couple of years' time, people will ask which century was this palace built in. So we said, we really hope that you won't have to wait that long. Maybe in 6 months, people will ask. But we were fortunate that in first month itself, the guests had started asking that question. So what we did was we realized that any city has its own language, which is based on the nature. All the man-made heritage is totally dependent on the natural heritage. This is what we had realized while doing the planning policies of Udaipur. So we had studied that. We had also gone as students in 60s to do the measure drawings of Udaipur. So we were very much aware of the kind of courtyards you would have, the streets that we had. And it was really a fascinating experience even in student days. And we loved that city. It was first year, second year, and fourth year wrights who had gone there. And so that was carried on when we studied the city for the planning, laying down the planning policies for it. And then Mr. Arvind Singh Ji Mewad, the erstwhile Maharana of that place, he invited us to work with him on the palace. And so this is the palace complex. So inspired by what was the palace. And since we were doing a lot of renovation, adaptive reuse, and a lot of interiors, and few additions in the palace complex, we had to study it thoroughly. And it's Mr. Arvind Singh Ji Mewad, Shri Ji Arvind Singh Ji Mewad, as he is called, who introduced us to Mr. Oberoi, as this is their land parcel, which is leased to Oberois. So he was very conscious of what kind of development should occur around the lake. And this lake has all palace complexes, the lake palace, the in the island that you have. The famous Lake Palace is right there. Between the two, the palace and Udai Vilas, and you have the city on one of its edge. So it was very crucial that we follow the same language and do not disturb it with modern styles of architecture, which would be totally incongruent to this place. And it would actually ruin the place. Can you imagine in Paris on Champs-Élysées, you have a multi-storied glass box coming up? What would it do to that? Similarly, I think we have to become sensitive to our cities and our lake edges. So as you start approaching the hotel, which let me tell you is a very complex building. And when he asked us to do the hotel, he asked us, have you done a hotel before? And we said, no, we have not done a single newly built hotel before, but we have worked with Arvind Singh Ji on his hotels. So we studied the hotels also, and we on one end, and we studied different Oberoi hotels and how they functioned, and incorporated the learnings, whatever were the shortcomings of that were improved here. And this is what you see as you approach. To us, all our traditional architecture is about experiences. They create experiences. It's nothing but experience created through the play of light, play of forms, the way the light falls on these different forms, the openings, the cusped arches, the columns, the colonnaded facades, and simple lime wash, which reflects, which shows the shadows and the craftsmanship of each element that you can see. And the way in all our traditional buildings, a special attention was always given on how a building interacts with the sky. And that is very important. Whereas if you look at our modern buildings, they are straight cut buildings. Even in places like where you have snowfalls, you still see those buildings not responding to it. This is the inner courtyard with its banquet hall facilities at the lower level and the rooms at the upper level. So each room responds to whatever is the condition outside and towards the corridor. Here is the lily pond that Mr. Oberoi was very clear that I want one of the best lily ponds created. And where else could it be but in this beautiful courtyard adorned with so many cusped arches and craftwork and artworks. This is the main entrance and the entrance courtyard to the lobby. Again, you will see how it changes throughout the day with changing sun. And also as the sun changes during different weather, again, the angles of the sun change and it creates amazing reflections, shadows, etc. And we have actually created more than 120 arches. The way the surface treatment takes place, you know, there is a layering. If you see all our architecture, traditional architecture, and especially in Rajasthan, there is so much of layering that happens in between. Either it's a jali or it's a cusped arch, or even the arches create that depth, which creates a sense of harmony when you're in that space. And we realized that different places demand a different treatment, different types of arches. You don't have one single arch. We have come up with 120 different arches here. And there is so much of variation. We created courtyards, we created walkways, and we said we don't want double loaded corridors at all, so that we don't have to air condition that. This is a entrance courtyard to the presidential suite. The presidential suite itself with its charoka and all the chhatris that adorn all the terraces and the reflections. It's a play of light, water, reflection in the water, the way the wind reacts with the water, the way the fountains react, even our terraces. If you look at the modern building terraces and you look at our traditional terraces, we picked up from our traditions. And this is the spa, health club and spa. There's water here and water beyond, and you see it framed through an arch, the landscape, negotiating different levels of the hill. And that's the way you go to the suites and other courtyards. At an upper level, the play of, see, you don't have to design anything symmetrically here. Things change. If the arch here needs to be small, then you adjust how many different types of arches you'll put in to negotiate that. We always use odd numbers traditionally. It's never even number. These were the terraces of different suites. And that's the crescent courtyard and the rectangular courtyard. Rectangular courtyard has its own swimming pool. And the crescent courtyard, you can see anywhere, at least there are 5 different types of arches. And this is a response to the rocks that existed there. The play, I mean, I don't have to say, look at the way the sun plays with the shadows and light of different times of the day. This is the rectangular courtyard with its own pool, and every room with its own terrace and courtyard and sit-outs. The link between the corridor and outside area. And as you come out, again, you're connected with the city. You're very much a part of that city. You're not standing out. You don't have to see, in modern architecture, the ego of architect has taken over. That it's me, it's my style. Why can't we just blend? Blend with what is surrounding, blend with the nature. It has to project the personality of the client. It has to project the need of that project and not ourselves. And when we have a style, we do a style statement, which means we only operate within those established language that we have for ourselves, which also restricts our creativity. Look at the play of light at dusk on the domes, and it changes the whole place completely. And the way the reflections are seen in the water, on the floor, the courtyard. You see the rooms upstairs and the banquet hall and meeting room facilities down there, which can spill over into this courtyard. The colonnade at night, it again has a different look and the feel. The rhythm of the colonnade. Then the lighting, sensitive lighting to enhance all that. The mashal lights, which went with the traditional ambience, and from across the lake. That's what you see. And all this was created by these craftspeople, 300 of highly skilled craftspeople working for 3 years, and 3,000 artisans working for 2.5 years. That is what helped to create the different facades, the different experiences, the different light, rhythm, shadows, etc. And it's always a treat to be there. Thank you.
Parul, that was lovely walk through the entire Udai Vilas as a journey. I would like to pick a few queries which ran through my mind as we were going through. Okay. And so you spoke about the ego of the architect and the style. Yeah. And which is true. We all have talked about, in fact, every client would complain about that. But apart from that, the entire process-driven approach that you talked about, and I remember you saying once about the entire, how you work in the section, as you shared in the case of Torrent, how the section resulted in the entire relationship between the exterior and the interior, and what the idea that Abhikram wanted from there. My question comes from, there seems to be a degree or a sense of organic growth, even in terms of Udai Vilas, when you talk about, while there were 120 arches, there's a repertoire of guidelines which exist. But ultimately, isn't there a danger in not controlling the final vista when there's an organic development?
See, for centuries, all our cities and our complexes have all developed organically. But there is an underlying principle to that organic growth, which is not there. We have city planning, but we don't have principles of how that city will grow. How will those streets develop? We have bylaws, but they're just bylaws for developers to exploit, to get maximum FSI. Maximum FSI was not a question. They knew that your sight lines were established. You couldn't build between that. Your heights were established. Only certain buildings could go beyond that height. And no matter what you did, whatever juggling you did, you were not allowed to do that. And there was a certain language. The alphabets were there. The words were given to you from those alphabets. And you had to put them together in whatever way you want. But follow a certain language. There is a continuity, there is a harmony, which we don't have today. And all our cities across the world look the same. So why should you travel anymore? To see what? The same kind of building, the same kind of glass building, same kind of facades. What does it offer today? And those buildings were not only harmonious, they were climate responsive. They were even today, why do we go and see all these old buildings, whether it's in India or old cities, or you go to Greek islands, you go to Europe? What for? To enjoy that harmony, right? Does it exist in the new cities? You go to Bombay, you love to walk in the fort area. You love to walk on the marine lines. Elsewhere, show me which are other places that you'd like to walk into. The malls?
Fair, point made.
Okay, thank you.
So, but also a query. For example, you brought out Bombay, etc. There is a degree of, sometimes when you say facade, often in language, you would say that it's there's a fakeness to the word facade, the falseness face, as you say, like it's like an applied lipstick or, makeup to hide. My whole question is that the whole facade development, how do you really look at. I love the way you presented the whole, how do you, the congruency to the city, etc. How do you link it up? Like in Fort, you do have the entire arcades to walk through,
Yes.
which is, while it's a face aligning all the buildings on the street, it also is a walkway for the people. And so there is a lot of congruency when you approach a traditional building or integration of urban planning or urbanism into the architecture of the space, leading to the facade development.
Yeah.
What would you really say in your, because like you said, when as a student, when you did the Udaipur measure drawings, it resulted in you working on the, when you were working in the City Palace or at Udai Vilas, there was a link, that was a learning.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how do you see that in the education system today, or to young minds working on projects? How do you really see, look at facades not as a superficial layer, or what would be your advice to them on approaching design or facade design? Not as a superficial layer, but as an integrated, congruent layer.
Yeah, okay. Facade design becomes a bit, I overreact to that, basically, because it has to emerge from your design itself. But we also want to, like, it's me, I'm there. Can we get rid of that? You get into huge housing colonies and gated communities, and there you accept one type of building, everywhere, which doesn't even have the variations that our traditional buildings have. Right? So, what can we not start from the schools, colleges, whether it will have to be engineering and architecture colleges, where you start from the education, where you start instilling pride into our traditions, into our history, into our way of building. So that, and basically it is lack of knowledge of how to go about it. We are taught about modern architecture, the Western way of living, the Western way of constructing. Can we evolve something for India? Can we redo it together? Can we reimagine India? Can we reimagine our cities? Can we stop our villages from becoming, uninteresting places to go to, like our cities? In cities, we are only looking at facilities today and what it provides. How many places that you love going to city, in a city, what are the places you go to? You go to theaters, you go to see some exhibition here, you go there. And if I take the example of, again, Fort area, even one building doesn't have one type of buildings, one type of windows or openings. There are 2-3 variations that you see, and one building next to each other, they are not exactly the same, but yet there is harmony. How do we get back to that? How do we achieve that? And I think through our education, through our planning policies, through our bylaws, that is what we need to focus on, and restrict ourselves. We are only going to use these materials. We are only going to use, so that there is a need for facade, because in the first place you want glass, because the glass vendor has come and sold you the glass, because you open up the magazines and today you see all glass buildings, then you see the Zen interiors, and then you see exposed concrete everywhere. We are already conserving CEPT, School of Architecture, because of exposed concrete and exposed bricks. A lot of it has deteriorated. They are redoing a lot of stuff, and they are spending crores and crores on conserving and renovating IIM complex. Have we ever looked at it? Does it even come into any of our magazines? Are we made aware of what is happening? When we are using these materials, we are keeping it exposed in 40 and 45 inches of rain. Look at the buildings. Okay, now again, let's look at the facades of fort area. How often have you seen people cleaning it? How much of maintenance does it require? The glass facades, you have contracts. I think in 10 years' time, the amount of money you will spend on maintaining that glass, keeping it clean, will be much more than what you would have spent on actually installing that glass. And because you have installed glass in the wrong directions, except for north, none of the other directions should you be using glass facades. Because you've done that, now you need a screen in front of it. Why? Because all the people inside, they pull down their blinds and the buildings actually look horrible. Because one has half blind which is closed, one is 1/3, and you see into that building. So now you have to create something in front which will make hide all that. And that's why all kinds of facades and all kinds of lighting that comes into picture. Can we see beyond all this? Don't you think it's time we question, we use our gray matter? Look at this in a different way.
No, I see it. I see this conversation leading to the fact that facades are not just the first layer of aesthetical appeal, but they're also the first layer of defense for a building.
Absolutely.
How do we start looking at them beyond the aesthetic and see how they become performative layers, which are a response to the climate, context, especially visually, that we tend to look at, but also in terms of performance and strength of the building, because they are going to weather the most.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I think that's a great line to take on facade design for you, and I think the great message for contemporary designers to take forward. Thank you, Parul, for a lovely educative session on how do we integrate timeless principles into the context of present. Look at materials again, which look at livelihood options for people or craftsmen to be integrated rather than change their profession. And because there are many cases where craftsmen have become labor force on construction sites itself, just because there is no opportunity for their craft. So I think thank you for that entire layered, deep rather than superficial facade approach to facade design. And sorry, I'm using the word facade design because I do think that it has a lesson in it. And I see you have to say something more. So your parting line is what we will close with.
No, I know no, I'll just thank you for being so, the way you ask questions, you really bring out whatever were the deeper thoughts and you make me react to it. And in a very pleasant way, it's been a very great experience, just talking to you and talking about our projects with you. At the same time, my closing remark for the session would be, let's re-educate ourselves. And in that re-education, let's not forget our partners, which are our craftspeople. Today government has allocated a lot of funds to train not craft people, I would say artisans, to work on the modern buildings, to train them in all different trades. Why can't we extend that to the traditional craftspeople? And let's make them partners in our design development. They have a lot to offer. They will come up with 10 different solutions that you can't even think of because of our limited knowledge. They have worked throughout their life with that material and they know the material inside out. And the kind of things that they can achieve is unbelievable. The kind of solutions that they can give you is unbelievable. So let's reinvent our education, architecture and engineering, because both go hand in hand. And let's look at facades in a very different way. So that, like I was attending a seminar on One World, where more than 1 million people had attended that webinar, not seminar. And one underlying thought was that the pandemic has shown them the way that we have to change. We have to get out of GDPs. We have to get out of planned obsolescence and continuous creation of new things and new trends, because that's making the whole earth unsustainable. And if we don't do that, we'll see more and more pandemics coming our way. So let's reinvent ourselves. Thank you.
On that note, thank you, Parul, and thank you, iDAC, for having us and having this reinvention of dialogue on facades. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ajay. And thank you, iDAC, for this opportunity. And thanks, Ajay, for probing me and getting things out of me that I might not have said otherwise. Thank you very much. Yeah.
This brings us to our very last session on the second day of the Facade and Beyond Summit. The panel discussion this evening is going to be discussing sustainable building envelopes. This panel is being moderated by architect Pushyamitra Londhe. The panelists include Mr. Micha Pawelka from Priedemann Facade Experts, Mr. Manjunath Shetty from Envelopetechnik Facade Consultancy, Mr. Syed Beary from Beary Group, and Mr. Bejay Jayan from Pidilite Industries. We assure you the panel is going to cover every aspect of a sustainable building envelope.
Hello everyone. So today we are having a topic which is of the times which we are all into it. It's about sustainability. And then when we talk of our buildings and the structure what we are using, then we have a great the facade around it. And then we also have to look at it how these have to be sustainable. So that's the topic of the day today, that how we can have sustainable building envelopes. So we have our panelists here today. We have Mr. Bejay Jayan, Mr. Micha Pawelka, Mr. Syed Beary, and Mr. Manjunath Shetty here. So we can begin now. Maybe I can start with Mr. Bejay. And Mr. Bejay, I would like to know if you could tell all of us that what do you think are the core enablers or the drivers of a truly sustainable building envelope?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I think there are many factors, but I'm going to highlight two particular ones that I really feel is necessary for a sustainable envelope or a facade. Mm-hmm. Firstly, it needs to be a material which is green or environmental friendly. And I'll come back to that point again. And secondly, I feel that using this material would mean that the consumer would be consuming less energy for his building. So I'm going to take those 2 points. My first point, like I said, the material needs to be environmental friendly. There are many ways you can actually assess a material if it's for its sustainability factor. I think the most crucial one is its embodied carbon emission or life cycle carbon emission or carbon footprint, which is essentially the direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated with all activities in the product's life cycle. So this is very key. And I know for a fact that today architects and consultants actually take this into account for many sustainable buildings, because most of the design softwares today have this opportunity where you can make an informed decision on the carbon footprint of a material. Mm-hmm. So this is very, very key. Firstly, a good material needs to go on the facade. The second thing, which I feel is equally important, is how well the facade helps you reduce your energy demand, particularly the HVAC demand. What I mean by this and why this is important is that every single unit of electricity that you save you're actually making a big impact because you cut down the what we call the operational carbon emissions that a building produces. Facades play a huge role for cutting down HVAC because it's what keeps us apart from the exterior environment and sort of helps us keep that indoor ambient conditions. So when the one key parameter that you would that you should take into consideration here is the U value or the insulation that needs to go on the facade, especially when you are in extreme climate zone. So we know that a U value of 0.57 is much better than a U value of 1.7. I believe buildings in India traditionally, the U values range in the range of 1.7, 1.8, which is not very well insulated. But today the standards are say 0.57, and the reason for that is that the indoor conditions are kept really ambient, 21, 22, 23 degrees Celsius, and that means your HVAC systems, heating systems, or cooling systems, whatever it may be, it does not have to consume a lot of energy, and that is really key. When you talk about sustainable facades. So these 2 points are really important. And obviously there's many other points, like, for example, whatever you put on the facade needs to be a durable material, long life, but very little maintenance. So I think these 3 points are the key elements, personally, I feel, for a sustainable, that needs to drive the sustainable facade.
Yeah, Bejay, I think you made a very, very valid point about how about saving energy when you have this large, call centers or large office spaces today, what we have. So saving energy is one important point. And then when you talk of building envelopes, then about using the materials smartly. And we have, I think, a lot of green materials available in the market today where we can, wisely use them. So taking it from there, I would like to ask Micha, but when we talk of the different green materials, so do you think that using these materials is, though we have a lot of variety in them, so we are just cutting short our profits for a long-term, gain in that? So how do you look at this using of these green materials or the profits?
See, I think that's anyway a big discussion, not even before the matter of sustainability. What is our approach on assessing a cost? Do we assess a cost on just the current purchase price, or do we assess the cost on the life cycle of a building? And this comes along in our everyday life. Okay, do you go with a ready-made garment when you buy a suit, or you go for a tailor, knowing that this suit will last probably for another 10 years? And then you have to calculate 10 years for this amount divided by 10 years. What is my cost with regards to the short term? Every day we are taking this kind of decisions, looking into a life cycle of something. Except with buildings, usually we have difficulties to do this. We are a German-based facade consultant. We are very used to this life cycle assessment without any question. And anything called so-called value engineering, which is usually cost cutting and not adding value to the building, does usually not happen with our approach because we are looking into the life cycle. And very, very rarely you can do this kind of cost cutting exercises, maintaining life cycle assessment. If you look to the word sustainability, what does it mean? A big part of the sustainability is whatever you do or build or purchase, you meet the need of the present without compromising the need of the future generation or the future in general of this, okay? And when you do this, you are forced to look into the life cycle of a building. There is no other way, or the life cycle of the material. And then we believe in general, yes, you are sacrificing short-term profit for a long-term investment. Although we believe the current practice in the market with cutting costs, looking into the current purchase price is anyway a wrong approach. You are adding this saving on a long term, multiple times usually. This is the experience. So looking into sustainability is an invest and is forcing you to look into life cycle to spend more money in the current situation. And we strongly believe this will improve the general quality of buildings, not only in terms of performance, as Bejay said, But in general, quality is what we believe.
Yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. That one should not look at the immediate, gains or immediate the profits, but look at the life cycle of the building, because it's going to last for many years, and then and choose the materials accordingly. So with that, I would like to ask Mr. Syed Beary. Sir, you are in a position today, being the chairman of the IGBC. How do you think, or where is the future of sustainable facades taking us?
Yeah, so this is like this, that even though I'm the chairman of the IGBC Bangalore chapter, green building and sustainability has come much beyond that. When the world was not talking about sustainability, carbon credit, and all those stuff, from the inception, 1981, it's almost 40 years reaching, we never, cut the tree, we never change the concept, control. So that is a commitment for us to the green. Now, whatever limited my understanding is, if there is one component which can really make a building sustainable in a true sense, that is the facade. And my facade is not the facade of what material we are going to use, how beautiful you are going to make, what are the touch and feeling. That is not facade. My facade is not after the building is complete, once the structure is up, then what type of a glass and, louvers or paint and stuff like that. Our facade is in the design intent. One of the key intent of the design is the facade design. And facade design is not a vertical facade design. It is how you design the building profile. How is the green, what is the footprint, how you are going to orient it, what is the linear place, how you are going to take care of the sun path and the wind path and, so many other aspects. We have done one project called Beary's Global Research Triangle. It is a large 1.4 million square foot. Imagine just on the facade front, where we require around 7,000 kilowatts of power to run the facility, we are managing with less than 2,000 kilowatts of power. Just less than 2,000. That means less than 1/3. It is primarily because the orientation. The linear portion we faced towards north and south, and in the southern side we kept all our services, our staircase and the lift wells and things like that. We have created a double skin wall, and in the northern side we kept double glazing, with the thermal break, and all that. Then the top cover, the terrace cover. Overall, the facade has played such an important role, clubbed with the technology we use, like a free air cooling, night purging, and stuff like that. We got just within 2,000 kilowatts of power. We are managing the show. Unfortunately, what is happening, according to my understanding, you see, we need to look deep into the nature. When you look deep into the nature, nature will tell us how the look and feel should be. For example, like a goat in Kashmir, when God created the goat in Kashmir, by default it is having a long hair in the fur. Whereas the very same goat, even the very goat of Kashmir, if you bring it to the southern India, and manage it for, say, 10, 20 years, it will change outside facade. So it is a simple application that what we have done, what is sustainable for West, we try to imitate in our tropical country. We make all the four-side glass glazing, facade. Then we wanted to make it as a sustainably efficient. That is the height of stupidity. According to me, in the design, the application of mind, that is where we need to really structure how well we can do it. And the worst is a GCC country. In a desert country where the least power, the heat is 38, it goes up to 52. And crazily, just because God has given them some money, they made everything glass. What they required is a jolly work, the louvers, how you can cover the whole aspect. So that is what really required. And once we, take facade in the design itself, day one, it has to come as one of the important elements. Then we can make a building really sustainable.
Yes, sir. As architects also, when we design the building, we always look at the orientation, we look at the sun path and other aspects and the wind direction. What point you're trying to make is that we have to look at the geographical conditions and the location where it is, and then smartly design the building and its envelope. Maybe make it more breathable, you can say, in a way. So with this, I would like to ask Mr. Shetty, Mr. Manjunath Shetty, that when we're talking of optimizing energy and things like that in a sustainable facade, do you think that we are exceeding in applicable in the energy performance standards, or how do you look at this?
Uh, uh, I think the standards and codes establish kind of a minimalistic requirement, minimalistic compliant requirement. I would suggest that the design should exceed the minimalistic requirements. That's what I think.
So you're saying that we should have just the minimum standards, but they have to be, and then we should follow those guidelines and move ahead.
No. I'm saying it the other way. I'm saying the standards and codes lay out minimal requirements. I think the intent should be exceeding that requirement. The design performance should exceed that requirement. Not to stick to the code and design it to meet that minimum requirements.
Okay, I'd like to ask Bejay that what do you, being the largest construction manufacturer in India, how do you think you can handle the problems involved in the sustainable facade?
Well, there's two elements to that question, I feel. One, how can we push people to go for sustainable facade? I think that's what I'll answer that question. In terms of problems within sustainable facades, I think one thing I can say as Pidilite is that we do a lot of research and development on our products before we get into the market. So I'm talking about the materials itself. We actually do mock-ups. We test this out in the environment at least for 1.5 years, 2 years, and see how they perform before we actually bring it out into the market. For your information, we associates of Pidilite, we have a state-of-the-art climatic chamber built here, and we test different kinds of facades in it to check the heat transfer properties of facade, and we can compare the cooling consumption, how much energy is being saved when you use this type A or type B or type C. So that's the amount of research R&D work that Pidilite is doing, collaborating with us in the Middle East. In terms of challenges to get people to actually think right, it's just in a mindset like Mr. Syed was saying, think right. I believe there needs to be a little bit of push from the regulatory bodies and local authorities. I know the IGBC is doing a great job. And I think some of the building design codes are mandated in some parts of India, but some parts it's not. So there's a lot of push that is needed from the local authorities and the regulatory bodies to help people think. We need to hold their hand and sort of teach them to think this way first. Yes, there will be a lot of havoc at first, I mean, every country which has implemented green building standards, all the consultants and the contractors, hey, where did this come from? What is this? But I believe everybody will learn when they live in a building which has a sustainable facade or sustainable elements, they will see the benefits themselves. And that's the way people will start to think from a design perspective, how to build something in a sustainable way. And yes, there is another challenge, like some of you were saying about that initial cost that is coming, especially during this COVID pandemic time. We may think that people won't invest that extra, but I'm positive. I feel now people will start looking into long-term savings, like what Micha was saying. Now people will start thinking, okay, I will invest that little extra, but I get an amazing building which is going to be there for my next generations, which is going to save me energy, which is going to do justice to the environment out there. So yeah, there are challenges in trying to implement this idea of trying to build a sustainable facade, but I feel these are not major challenges. You know, everything can be taken care of.
Yeah, what you're saying is basically that you need to go and educate people about these things, and then what you said, that going and holding their hand and making them, you know,
Yes,
use them in
absolutely.
the building. So that's
If
the
I
right
may,
way.
if I may add to that, you know, when we set up this research lab here, and I'm actually heavily involved in research. I have a PhD, and I try to make things very scientific. But then the top management told me, whatever research you do, you have to make sure you show people energy savings, and you show people what sort of a difference the facade can make on the indoor ambient conditions. So we've built a chamber here where if any clients or stakeholders or government authorities come, they can actually see in real time what differences it's making. Having a U value of 0.57 and 1.7, what differences it's making, you can actually see it in front of you. And we have tied up with some of the most technologically advanced institutions. We have Tecnalia from Spain. I maybe Micha knows about Tecnalia. They have an organization with 50, 70 years of experience in research. We've tied up with them, and we've sort of built this facility here. This is in Middle East now, and Pidilite is trying to is bringing this in India as well. A much larger version of this climatic chamber, for the very fact just to educate people and show people the benefits of a sustainable facade.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the kind of knowledge and research what you're doing, I think definitely our future generation would benefit out of it. So it's great, good work. And I'm happy that you're saying that you're getting into India also.
Yes, we are.
All your research work. So it will definitely benefit maybe not just India but other countries as well. So that's great.
You.
So I would like to ask Micha, because earlier we were talking about about this when Mr. Syed was mentioning about having jalis or the breathable facades and things like that. So in that context, how do you look at the security or the safety of the building? Do you think that's while we are doing all this thing, it's compromised, or how do you think the sustainability objectives can still be achieved in such kind of facades?
No, basically it can be achieved, but it's a question of money, right? And that's part also of the question. How can, if the things are not available in the country, if you look into India, is it available? What is the budget situation? How can you implement sustainable facades? There are very high technical solutions. Okay, for example, we developed something 2 years ago where a client in Germany wanted a very transparent building. And that's a little bit difficult under the current energy saving regulations in Germany. It's almost impossible. You need to have solid walls. He wanted to have a glass. He was a big fan of Kohlhaas with transparent buildings. So we developed basically a system where, of course, we use triple glass units as it is required now in Europe, but we use the inner blind of the system as a second skin. So it's basically a double skin facade on demand. Okay. So when you have like a cloudy day in Germany, then you don't need the blind. But when the sun is coming out, then the blind is going down, and we are starting to exhaust the air between the glass and the blind. So it becomes a double skin facade. Very efficient, 25% energy saving, and it allows the client to have a transparent building basically. But this comes for a price, okay? So that's why what you see in our background, this is not only the headquarters, this is our research and development center, and it's a giant showroom. So we are developing these products if they are not available on the market, but it comes for a price tag, okay? And the price tag is multiple what we are used to spend, for example, in India. But if it comes to sustainability, I personally believe it is not always a question of money, okay? There is a big issue with how you spend your money, okay? It's not wrong to have a low budget. At times, it's better you design on the budget instead of you're designing for a dream, and later you realize there is probably a budget problem. I believe even an easy solution, a standard solution out of the local market, local extrusion, local execution can be done in a certain sustainable way if you are willing to invest a little bit of money. Of course, I mean what Bejay is talking about, very low U value. This comes as a price tag, and it is a challenge. To be honest, we are facing this currently in the Middle East. The Kuwaiti building code is very, very challenging, and it is making the facades very much expensive, and it is a challenge. So that's why I think what the IGBC is doing is very important, and I somehow disagree a little bit with Manjunath when you said it should exceed. You know, why we have laws and why these bodies like the IGBC is sitting in the in the forums where they are influencing the law, because usually people follow only if there is a law, right? I mean, look to the traffic, look to Dubai. We drive 140 on the road. Why? Because we are sustainable? No, because there are flashlights and radars every 500 meters, right? So if we are not getting controlled, we are not sticking to the law. That's why the bodies are important to implement it, to have it in a logical way. And I think there is a big shift on the market currently, that we are not only talking about U value or shading coefficient, but we are talking probably about what is the embedded carbon, what is the post-consumer recycling content of a material. You spoke about Technal, Bejay. They have their circa 75% post-consumer aluminum. This is a sustainable direction, and the government, the bodies, the law need to go into this right direction. We started to forbid plastic bags and plastic straws and all this kind of stuff. This is the direction we need. Somehow we need to be forced to go into the right direction. Then building construction will become more sustainable, because somebody is probably forced to save another 1 or 2 years, or to revisit his finance another 1 or 2 times until he has the real money to spend it in a sustainable way. This will help now and for generations.
Yeah, like what you're mentioning earlier, that you should have some budget in place in the initial of the project, so that later on you don't face those constraints of the low budget or things like that. And, and while we are mentioning and you're explaining things, you also mentioned about regulation. So here I'd like to ask Mr. Syed, being the chairman, I mean at that level at IGBC, when the regulations are not so evolved and the codes are not, building codes are not so much about the sustainability, how do you think where the stakeholders would be, how much they would be involved in doing all these things? So your voice is mute, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I always do make this mistake. I'm sorry for that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
The NBC of the latest NBC, Volume 2, we have, there is a separate chapter, Chapter 11, primarily dealing about the sustainability. The entire credit of that should go to Dr. Prem C. Jain, the late Dr. Prem C. Jain. Under his, chairmanship, it was, organized, where the present chairman, V. Suresh, and many other stalwarts were there. Now, the interesting development is what happened 2 weeks back, when the IGBC, Indian Green Building Council, had their, the National Congress, the 18th Congress. It was inaugurated by none other than our Honorable Vice President Venkaiah Naidu sir. Now, in his inaugural address, such an interesting aspect he has brought in. He has given a different vision statement to IGBC to follow, not only to the IGBC, all other rating system. The first and foremost, what he mentioned is he wants to make the rating system as mandatory. Okay. Imagine if that's going to happen, that's going to be the game changer. Number 2, he said every government building, whether it is a CPWD to start with, and even the state government building should be green compliant. The third thing he said, it is not enough the new building, even the building which has already been built, that should be retrofitted. And now I will tell you a very interesting part, because everybody is talking about commercial, ROI and all that aspect. He said the green compliant building should have incentive. It should be incentive driven. For the developer, developer, he said he should have an additional FSI, wherein for the user, the resident unit owner or any other user, there should be a corporation tax reduction. And if that is going to happen, believe me, that is going to make India, now we are in the third level in the world, that is going to make it, real, that's going to be the game changer, and India can become the number one green building, developer in the world. Now I will tell you, because there are 2-3 people talk about the commercial aspect. In our own way, we also build, as I told you, the BJRT, which is the first LEED platinum, but both by IGBC and USGBC, when we got in 2008. Now, at that time, we did spend about 12 to 14% more money. That is a fact. But then that 12 to 14% today, if you have to make a platinum rated building with the best of design element, it can be brought it down within around 5 to 6% at the max. Now, let me tell you the commercial aspect. See, when we built our building in Whitefield, we were about 4.5 kilometers away from Whitefield, wherein the ITPL, everything is in the main ITP, in the main Whitefield. That the rent was going between 20 to 28 rupee, whereas we got, in 2012, we got 32.5 rupee to start with. Of course, it was a major challenge. There was a risk factor. There was but then we are passionately involved. So for us, green is not a fashion, because there are things I've seen there. One, there is a fashionately involved, and passionately involved. So we are in the later part. So we said no, and that too, you must realize that where we built this BGRT, all around was a residential development, and the developers' mentality. One person takes the lead. That becomes a success story. Everybody will follow as a bandwagon. Then they will build more. Then, market will crash and the cycle will start. But what we did, we said, no, when everybody is building residential, we should not build residential. Rather we should build commercial. Then comes what type of a commercial? There we build the research park. So it is by default, it becomes walk to work or cycle to work. That is how we go into. It is not a commercial aspect. Commercial aspect, of course, is required, but then it should go beyond that. Then we can really make a world, which which can become a legacy when we are not there.
Yeah, like all of us today are become sensitive towards sustainability and the nature and climate, but at the same time, you have to have, like what you said, you should have a passion for doing all these things. Unless that is there, I think there's no way forward to it. But like all the developers think, like one of the developers was telling me once that, free mein kya mila? What I got additional. So it's like that. So you have to take care of them as well, because ultimately it's business. So everyone has to be a win-win situation for everyone. Otherwise, it doesn't, make it go forward. So with this, I like to ask Mr. Manjunath Shetty that in a tropical country like India, what do you think is the best practices should be followed in terms of sustainability?
I think sustainable design is very important. I think earlier I've answered whether the performance level should just meet the codal requirements or should it exceed. What I explained is it should exceed. People should be passionate about designing something exceeding the requirements codes, not just meet the codal requirement and stop it there. So codal compliance is minimalistic requirement. So I think a very systematic design approach should be adopted. It starts with understanding project location, climate condition, aesthetic factors, material options, and use of buildings. There are a variety of information you use before starting the design. And I think facade consultant should be appointed and should be involved at a very early stage. We would always prefer to involve at a conceptual design stage, and at the design stage where you're working at the form of the building, which doesn't happen a lot of times in India. I think the best practice is appoint facade consultant at a very early stage. We usually model form, and we have tools and technology to model and analyze and see which part of building, which side of building is more exposed for solar radiation. Of course, it depends, it varies project to project conditions. We have to analyze sun path throughout the year for a particular project condition. We have to model it and understand how much glazing should go which side of the building. There are different solutions available. One may not suit to a particular project, but may be best suited for another project. So it's a design iteration process. So these kind of high-tech tools and technology should be adopted in projects at the design stage. I would suggest people should give preference to sustainable materials. They should give preference to regional materials, and they should give preference to regional contractors, vendors, processors. Also, I think at the design stage, they should give preference to a lot of natural ventilation. It may not be practical for all kinds of buildings. Certain buildings may not be able to use natural ventilation, but there are many types of building that can operate without mechanical cooling all the time. We should design an envelope understanding building usage, and we should give preference to natural ventilation. And there are a variety of ventilation, not just keeping openable panel. Maybe there are advanced ventilation system that can have integrated filter system that keeps pollutant out and allow natural ventilation. So I think I could summarize these are few best practices that helps in achieving sustainable development goals.
Yeah, what you're saying, Manjunath, is absolutely right. Unless you go the nature's way, I don't think that's the best way to go ahead. So I think we had a really good insight from all of you, being experts in your own field, and and then the cost we spoke about. We spoke about the research, what is happening in this field, and of course the regulation and how it can be made friendly and a win-win for everybody. I think it was a great talking to all of you and getting information and all the kind of knowledge from all of you.
Mr. Mitra,
yes,
if
sir.
you can allow me, can you give me 2 minutes?
Yes,
there is one product, one project.
Yes.
It is all about facade, nothing more, nothing less.
Oh, great! Tell me, please.
Okay. So I will just showcase to you. You can see this.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So this is a mosque, in Gulf country. Now I'm not going to tell you which Gulf country, okay? And because and this mosque, the entire thing is working on the facade. So our brief with our architect is that create an additional skin, and that skin should whatever we build as a masjid, it will all be beneath that skin. So that is reducing the heat gain. Number 2, the skin what they have created, even though our brief is primarily to reduce the heat gain, they went much ahead. Because in a place like Gulf country, the sand dunes are one major challenge. And for that they created some kind of a sensor based locking system. So whenever it crosses certain threshold point, it locks it. So in the bargain, the sand doesn't get inside. And on the top of the facade, we are having a solar. So the entire power requirement is being worked, with the solar energy. And here it doesn't look like a typical masjid with the dome and minarets and stuff like that. It is a very, very modern and contemporary look. And here, because in the masjid normally used for 5 times a day for about half an hour also in each time. So what we have done this is not only the prayer area, it is also a community place. That is how we have designed the whole thing. But if you say the one aspect, what will make the change in this entire design is the facade. So I thought it is worthwhile to showcase to you people. Thank you.
Yes, definitely, that was a good example of of the sustainable facade and how we can incorporate it. Yeah, Mr. Bejay, can you just say what do we feel about sustainability or the topic what you're talking today?
Yes, a sustainable facade is so key to a green, to achieve like a green building or a sustainable building. You know, I dream tomorrow all the buildings that we build are either near zero or net zero. And to achieve that, you will find in most cases you really need a sustainable facade, especially in a country like India when tomorrow energy demand, I mean, I don't know, might surpass the production. We really need to think big, and this is the time, like it's high time we do that. So the facade is very important. It protects the occupants and keeps the exterior conditions from entering the building. uh, Obviously, designing a facade, a sustainable facade, means a big responsibility for us architects and engineers. But it is something that we are morally, I feel we are morally obliged to do. I mean, it is our responsibility to leave planet Earth better than the way we found it. So we ought to do our responsibility to conserve and preserve our resources for the future generations. As Pidilite, I like just want to say that we are introducing low energy consumption systems, which ensures that you can give the best envelope to a building, and in most cases we have both roof and wall insulation. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to hit this problem as a whole, not just providing wall solution products, but also roof solution. So as an entire building envelope, you protect and you can save up to 45% of HVAC costs. So that's what, as a company, we are doing, and we are trying to go further than the energy consumption, energy savings that we save. And finally, I'd like to say, yes, you will find that most sustainable facades are a little bit more expensive than our traditional solutions, but it really does not matter, because the benefits that you get from this, like many in this panel already said, it's unbelievable. Like you save a lot in your energy demand. Most cases or not, you get your return over investment in about 4 to 7 years. A long-lasting facade, something that it is very durable, and most importantly, environmental friendly, which also means you're doing justice to the next generation. So I urge you all to build right and build responsible.
Yeah, well, this is very well said. Yes. What I want to say, sustainability in facades requires to look on the building life cycle. There is no other choice. Looking on the building life cycle will not increase your cost. It will decrease your cost, but only on the life cycle. On a short term, it may increase your cost a little bit. Sustainability in facades doesn't need to be ventilated, double skin, something complicated. It is not a problem if your budget is low. We can design something sustainable based on low budget, and we should not forget sustainability in material doesn't matter at all if we are not taking care about that we are building it in a quality. So it needs to be a comprehensive approach. Priedemann has 26 years experience in facade consultants in Germany, 15 years in the Gulf, 8 years in India. We are ready to do, but the market needs to change, and with the help of IGBC and other bodies, introducing the appropriate laws will also help to drive the market in the right direction.
Yes, I think sustainable development is very important. It needs to be done passionately. I think developers and designers need to be cultured to develop sustainable solutions, and they should be proud of it. It is also important that architects and developers appoint facade engineering specialists at very early stage of design. And what we see is in a lot of projects, they do appoint sustainable design consultants, but they are very good at coming up with sustainable design solutions to an extent. But economic aspects of design is most of the time left out. They figure out how much glazing area should be left, but the cost of that solution is not determined. And by the time facade consultants are appointed, and by the time facade consultants show the cost of the solution, developers tend to say that, look, it's going out of my budget now. How do we reduce the cost? Either they start shooting down some of the solutions, or they'll start looking at ways of compromising spec or quality. I think sustainable design is not always expensive, and there are a variety of solutions. Some of them are not at all expensive. You just have to know the numbers at the right time and the solution at the right time. And it is best done at the very early stage of design. And this is one correction I think Indian construction industry needs to adapt.
Yes, you see, our endeavor is to consistently develop projects that makes difference to the place, the people, and the planet. Thank you.
A sustainable facade is absolute key to green buildings or a sustainable building. The facade is what protects the occupants and keeps the exterior conditions from entering the building. A sustainable facade does not by any chance mean something that is poor in aesthetics or poor in performance. In fact, some of the most sustainable facades are the best performing and the best looking buildings ever. Obviously, designing a sustainable facade means a big responsibility for us architects and engineers, but it is something that we are morally obliged to do, as it is our responsibility to leave this planet better than we found it. We ought to do our responsibility to conserve and preserve our resources and save for our future generations. So what are the key components of a sustainable facade? Three things. Use green materials that have less embodied carbon, which naturally means that they are environmental friendly. Need to have good insulation value, because when you have good insulation, your indoor ambient conditions are maintained quite easily, and therefore your HVAC systems, your heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, they do not have to consume more than it is required. So remember, typically HVAC is 50 to 60% of the total building's energy consumption, and having a facade with good insulation just means that you can help save about 40% of this consumption. And thirdly, a facade needs to be durable and long lasting with very little maintenance. So I believe these three boxes needs to be ticked when it comes to designing a sustainable facade. Some of the steps that we have taken as Pidilite to ensure that we provide a sustainable solution to our clients is that, we have the LEC systems, the low energy consumption systems, which ensures the best envelope a building can get. We not only do roof insulation, but we also do wall insulation. And these two solutions can work together and help the client save up to 45% of HVAC costs. Our R&D is huge. We ensure all products and systems for wall and roof have gone through stringent testing according to international standards. This ensures durability and longevity in all our solutions. We build live mock-ups and samples and leave it exposed to the environment to see the long-term effect. We study from this and improve our chemistry and the product itself. We also have a large-scale state-of-the-art climatic chamber. In that, for example, we can study heat transfer properties through the envelope or the energy consumed by HVAC systems. We also recently won the Middle East Green Building Research Award for 2020. This climatic chamber won that award. So this is the state of the R&D that we do. Yes, you will mostly find that some of the sustainable facade solutions are a little bit more expensive and client will have to pay a little bit more than what he would pay for traditional solutions. But the benefit you're getting is lifelong. Energy demand reduction, which means savings after the initial 4 to 7 years of investment, a long-lasting facade, a low maintenance, and also environmental friendly, which also means that you're doing justice to the next generation. Thank you very much for listening. I wish you all the best. I urge you all to build right and build responsible. Goodbye and stay safe.